Welcome everyone to the StreamYard world, those of you on LinkedIn, those of you on our YouTube feed as well. It's my absolute pleasure to shoot the breeze with well-known educational futurist Tony Ryan, who has the same accent as me, which means he comes from the same part of the world, for those of you watching from various regions and geographies. And I'll get Tony to introduce himself in a second. But this is part of the ongoing series to bring thought leadership and exploration of elements in education in various ways to the wider world through the agency of EduSpark. Tony, welcome. Just a quick little, I know you love to say it's not about me, it's about the conversation about the other opportunity, but I think people would love to know a little bit about your background and what floats your boat. What floats your boat? No coffee. What floats your boat in terms of the narrative, the conversation, the focus, the impact you like to have?
Hi, Andrew, and hello to everyone who's listening. And before I forget, can I please acknowledge anyone who is an educator who is watching this right now? I'm just in awe of what you have done in the past few years. It has not been the easiest time, except you needed to do it for the welfare of the most important profession on the planet, which is education, which is what I live for. I was a teacher for about 14 years, both primary and secondary. I've been an educational consultant since then, worked in about 12 countries, and I generally talk about the future of education. So the sort of writing I've done is books like this, The Next Generation, talking about where children in school today will be in the 2030s and 2040s, and we might talk about that sometime through this session as well. I'm working on a book right now called How to Predict the Future, most of the time. And I assure you that sometimes you can, more than you might think you can. How's that, Andrew?
That sounds absolutely fabulous. Thanks, Tony. And we've just noticed that we've got a few problems with LinkedIn, so I might just fix a few things in the background while you're talking. The whole world, though, of education is really being challenged, I think, has been challenged for quite some time. And in terms of producing kids that are appropriately skilled and have the right mindsets for the current demands in our rapidly changing world, and I think we've been seeing that growing gap between teaching kids stuff and teaching what they need to know and how to solve problems. Would you like to frame the conversation today, just while I do a quick bit of background work on trying to bring our LinkedIn audience in?
Mate, of course. And it's what is interesting about the large language models, like ChatGPT-4 and many others. They are more than just an interesting tool, which they are in themselves. And if you do enough research, you can find they can do nearly anything for you to make your job easier. What they're doing is signaling to us the sort of education that we could have that we've been talking about for years. One that is one-on-one, it's individualized, it's personalized, it's paying respect to different cultures and creeds and everything else that makes children different. And we're going to be able to deliver on that. And in fact, we will have no choice. We cannot go back ever to the didactic model of one lecturing the many. And if you've got some visual imagination, think of it perhaps in terms of energy in a room where you are just sending the energy out to 28 or 35 children. A slightly better one is when the energy comes back to you and so you engage in a two-way conversation. But the new one is going to be where you are part of this model. It's a neural model. Everything is connected in every different way. So you're going to become more of a learning architect than a standard teacher. And an architect is someone who designs learning. And the AI is going to significantly contribute to that.
That's a really important frame from the point of view, and I was just watching the watch because it keeps pinging away, I think, with the problem that we might have with our LinkedIn side. But it brings us into this first broad question. Can we really predict the future of education? Can we predict anything that's in the future? What are your comments and frames around that?
Well, given that I've been doing some research on this with this new book, my answer is, in part, you can predict a lot of things about the future. I mean, our brains are predictive entities, and they're always looking for what's going to happen up ahead. If you drove a car today, I can guarantee you were doing some predicting and determining whether that person next to you was going to suddenly pull over in front of you, and a whole lot of other things that happen in traffic. If you play sports, you're predicting ahead all the time. There are probably three key perspectives on this, Andrew, in terms of predicting everything up ahead. The first one is you can't. Obviously, you can't predict gold lotto numbers. Chances are that a lot of people wouldn't be here right now if you could. You can't predict anything that's chance, like, black swan events, like major earthquakes. The second perspective, though, is that you often can with some degree of probability. So we can do that in schools and work out, for example, how many 14-year-olds we'll have in a school in 5 years' time by counting the number of 9-year-olds we've got in the community now and doing a bit of extrapolation on, the social data. You can work out how many 14-year-olds we'll have there. Anything can be predicted in terms of probability, anywhere between 0 and 100%. So, for example, I can 100% predict that the sun is going to come up tomorrow morning. It absolutely will. If it doesn't, we're all in big trouble. And I can give a 0% certainty that an outer space alien is not going to knock on your school door tomorrow morning. Some people might think to differ, but I think it's 0%, and everything else fits in between. The most powerful, though, in terms of perspectives on predicting, is that you can create it. And it's not some sort of Pollyanna perspective either. You absolutely create your future with what you do now. So if you maintain your fitness and good health, you're more likely to be fit and healthy in 5 and 20 years' time. And that's the power of education. It's creating this all the time in young people. And that's why it's so important we prepare them for what's up ahead. And that's what we have to focus on, their capabilities. So that means they're going to be capable of coping with whatever happens up ahead. But when it comes to prediction, 3 perspectives, and I think they're all really important.
The temporal perspective, the time frame, is a part of that picture. And really, in some ways, the scope of our conversation, I think when we planned this, we weren't thinking that such a significant change as the general language, generative artificial intelligence world would land with such impact. So we've got that short time frame of actually some of that has arrived already, and then we've got the long time frame that will start to shape how things work. And you do a lot of the work in that longer time frame. Let's just give a bit of perspective of the temporal frame in which you work.
Look, I'm a pragmatist because once a teacher, always a teacher, and I need to know what I'm going to do in period 2 that will get some effect. So I have various ideas on how you can make use of the large language models, although it's quite easy to search for them because teachers everywhere are now, sharing them with each other. The long term is difficult to establish, partly because of the exponentialities, Andrew. We're probably going to see more change in the next 2 decades than we've seen in the previous 500 years. And not everyone's going to be able to cope very well with that one. So taking that into account, trying to predict where things are going to be up ahead, it tends to be done with scenarios as compared to an explicit, this is what will happen. So in education, for example, we might talk about 3 or 4 different scenarios from worst case to best case. So the worst case is where the system collapses because it's not providing support to a community that needs forward thinking. The best case scenario is where it becomes transformational and it actually leads the world into what can actually be accomplished up ahead. The other 2 might muddle around in the middle somewhere. So you write out a description for each one of them, and then you write out indicators that one's about to appear. So up ahead somewhere, when you see those indicators, that scenario is most likely. So generally, we can talk about the hybridization between human and robot. So if you're talking like the long-term possibilities, well, everyone watches science fiction movies at times, and a lot of them are quite prescient. They do know what's coming. I don't think we'll ever have sentient robots, though I could be wrong. Sentience means that you become alive. So you have emotional connection. You fall in love. You have a soul. And I may not know enough about this to be able to preach on it properly, but I cannot see how a robotic device can ever have so-called soul. They'll be programmed to be amazing. And at some point, they will be more intelligent than us, which is, by the way, at least 15 years away. I'm uneasy with the expression artificial intelligence. I don't think it's intelligence at all. It's just lots of programming on very big computers. But it's nothing like what humans can do. So they can beat us at chess and they can find something online faster than us, but they've got no idea how to apologize if they make a mistake. They don't know what to do, if you start to fall in love with something or someone. There's a lot of things that they can't do. However, up ahead, we're going to get closer and closer to that. So sometimes people say to me, are teachers going to get replaced by robots? And I go, possible. There's no short term on that one. We don't have the technology yet. We just have it on a 2-dimensional screen where we can, for example, create an avatar of you and we can have your face and your responses according to what you would say. So that's the sort of thing that's happened in the past 6 months. And that's amazing enough in itself. However, imagine extrapolating on that 20 years into the future where we've got a 3-dimensional, hybrid robot that in fact can personalize you, can become you. So we can then share you around with 5 different classrooms. I mean, we're so short of teachers now, we're going to have to start thinking outside the dodecahedron, because it is going to be quite traumatic in that sort of sense. Now, that raises a lot of other existentialist questions. You know, I mean, who programs these robots with their moral system, with their sense of ethics and values? Is it some, you know, very young person in Silicon Valley who likes to play games with people's minds? I mean, parents aren't going to accept that. So I think we're going to be human-centered on our learning for a long time yet, and probably even more so because of what's appearing, because people are going, hey, hold on, are we losing the sense of who we deeply are in terms of being humans? And education is a human profession, and we must always hold on to that. Though the wrap up on you saying what's going to happen up ahead, well, we're going to increasingly hybridize between humans and artificial entities, and we're already doing it. You can replace nearly every part of your body with some artificial device. You can get a prosthetic arm, and by thinking, you can make the fingers move around and pick something up. They're good. In 10 years' time, we'll start to dabble with the brain and be able to replace parts of it if something goes wrong with it. It's amazing technology. So already we're hybridizing in any case. And that's what teachers will be doing up ahead.
I made the point in our quick little pre-chat that hybridization has occurred already with the devices we're so addicted to, in outsourcing our memory to these devices. And I don't think the degree to which we see that as an external artifact maybe of our brain. We've got Dr. Michael Harvey adding some commentary. I'm not sure if you can see that, but thanks for your comments so far, Michael. And anyone else I do know that we've got some issues with LinkedIn, but please, anyone else who'd love to make a comment, feel free to do so. The other point I wanted to zero in on, that whole idea of identifying intelligence and what is it really, and we tend to anthropomorphize so well and so natively that we attribute characteristics to things that are not really there. And we'll get into ChatGPT in a second, but when we look at what ChatGPT is, it does appear to be magic, but it's a language prediction model. That's all it is. It's using probabilities to, in a very, very massively large scale database, to accurately predict through language processing. It doesn't have sentience, it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have the neural networks of knowledge we have. It's using mathematical prediction of language to impact its magicry, if that makes sense. So which leads us into this next one. What are the implications of using ChatGPT in education? Hot topic.
Now, to let everyone know, I shared a few images with Andrew before we started. So, mate, can you please go to the second one, if that's all right?
Yes, I will. And I'll let you start to introduce this. Michael, I'll actually, Paul, thank you for your message. I've got a question from Paul Donnelly coming up shortly. So we've got this image here.
Okay, well, my apologies for the blast of the titles there and the images with the different words, because I was going to show them up one by one. I've already mentioned a bit about them being intelligent. They're not. Though here are a few other perspectives on all of this, given that it's the big thing at the moment. And by the way, keep in mind that journalists are making this a big thing, partly because they're possibly going to be the first ones to be compromised by ChatGPT-4, and they know it. However, the brain needs to write. This is coming from someone who's a tech head and loves every aspect of all of this. The reality, though, is that the brain structures understanding and scaffolds on better understanding by writing, and even sometimes by using a pen or pencil and handwriting it. We need to write. So we need to still help children to understand how to write and create their thinking so that it then gets into that writing. So when I hear about it being banned in schools, I fully understand why they've done it. And that's an instant reaction. It was done with calculators and other things in past ages. It's inevitable that we have to welcome it in, because these children are going to be leaving school and it'll be considered to be standard out in their profession. So we're going to eventually have to go back to making use of it and showing children how to use it properly. The dilemma is that not all information is valid on it. You know that already. One of the biggest movers and shakers is the concept of prompt engineering. If you haven't heard of it before, please look it up, because it's about how you best prompt the technology to give you a decent answer. Please spend 30 minutes learning how to do that on some site somewhere, and it will save you so much time for the rest of your professional life. It's worth getting into prompt engineering. I sort of laugh when teachers say, oh, I can't set the same assignments I used to in the past, and I clap and cheer. We can't get rid of the bot just because people want to use the same old assignments. Anything that is just memory, acquisition and going through a whole lot of data and compiling it and putting it together into pieces and, one whole assignment is long gone. We're going to have to build personalization into it. We're going to have to do different things with it. So, for example, we might get the ChatGPT-4 to write an article and then ask children to critique that, what has been written. There are so many different ways of using it so it has value in what you do. I already know teachers who are generating personal lesson plans. Now, heaven knows teachers haven't got enough to do already in terms of their planning. Imagine having to write an individual lesson plan for every student you ever teach. It's pretty well impossible, depending on the parameters on that. However, this can be done with ChatGPT-4. It is beautiful what actually comes out with it. Now, I've hinted at this already, Andrew. It's the whole opening to a new form of education. Because everyone I've talked with in the past decade who has said they want education to become amazing is talking about personalized learning and, differentiating the curriculum so it appeals to that child at whatever stage she or he is at. And now we're being shown how to do this with this technology. And if you think this is interesting right now, imagine what this is going to be like in another decade, given the exponentialities I've talked about. Amazing stuff.
I would challenge the decade comment. I would imagine 12 months. It's appearing so quickly and so rapidly. Yep. Just coming back to a question that's sitting there, I'll just check to see if you want to answer this now or answer more at the end. Paul's asked the idea or checked in on this question. The current construct of schooling is based around industrial models, the Industrial Revolution. How do you see the structure changing? Is that something you want to hold for later, or is that something to speak to now?
We may as well go with it now. Yeah. The education is essentially about creating young people who can live a fulfilling life and contribute to society in general. If we keep driving along the highway looking in the rearview mirror, we're going to run into something and it's going to be a pretty serious accident. There's a lot of difference between what you can see in a rearview mirror as compared to a windscreen, just being a little bit, metaphorical there. And yet it's a really important one. So when it comes to things like the structure of education, for a start, there are many different ways of now delivering on it. We're short of teachers around the world. I don't know where we're going to find the extra 70 million we need within 8 years, which is what UNESCO is saying. We're not going to be able to find them. We can't afford to keep building brand new schools in a lot of countries. So we've got to rethink how, in fact, we educate a world. And in more and more, people are talking about lifelong learning passports, so that rather than you learning from the ages of 5 to about 18, you learn for life. So if you modeled out the old way of doing education, you'd sort of be born at the age of 0. You go to year 5 where you do a bit of stuff with your parents. Then at 5, you go to primary. Then at secondary, you go up a bit more. Then tertiary, you go up a bit more. Then after that 15 or 20 years, you drop like a stone and you go through the next 70 years of life until you die, hardly doing any learning. Now they're completely re-evaluating that. So they're saying they're going to start the learning at age 0. So we can monitor babies even to maximize on who they can be in their lives, even with what we do in those formative years. And then we go through primary, secondary, tertiary, and then we maintain a high standard of learning all through life in the community. This is why education is going to become so important and why teachers are going to become so valuable, because they're going to come to us and say, how do we do this? The European Union is especially very interested in this because governments know they save money by maintaining learning for life. When people are more educated, they tend to commit less crime and they tend not to abuse as much alcohol and drugs, and they have a lower, weight upon the medical system. And so it's instrumental on, governments to make sure that, we don't stop learning at the age of, 15, 18, 19. And then even with your question, Andrew, it comes down to like curriculum and what we deliver on with that, because who knows what the world will be like in 20 years' time. As you and I keep saying, it's the exponentialities. There could be very different skill sets needed. Like, literacy and numeracy, I think, will be there for a long time, though. There are other things like that prompt engineering, which could become a critical skill up ahead. I mean, the Greeks used to talk about the concept of eudaimonia, as in EUDA. Eudaimonia is the art of full living. For the last 50 years, people have been so rushed they've forgotten how to live a full, satisfying life. So maybe we'll instruct the robots to do our work for us, get paid for the work the robots do, and then we live a full life, learning to play a guitar in the park and play with our kids for a change. So a lot of dramatic things are going to happen up ahead. So wrapping up on that point, if anyone thinks that they're going to be able to maintain the status quo up ahead, I've got news for you, and it's pretty well all bad. We're all going to have to be open to opportunity, because we're going to be on a roller coaster ride. It is a very, very critical time in human history. By the way, I feel optimistic about it. I'm a realistic optimist about it. I don't think the world is going to end in 2050. And if it does, then it's going to be too late to come back and give me a hard time about saying that. And I've had a number of teenagers actually thinking the world is going to end in 2050. A lot of them have got that in their mind. That's the critical number. I'm going, gang, no way. You can make the world whatever you want it to be, taking into account climate change, which absolutely is happening. At the same time, there's amazing things we can do about it. And this again comes to educators and what we do to help them live up there. And that's still only just scratching the surface of that question.
Yeah. What is apparent to me, to sort of hone in on some of the key points you've made, the gap between what education is providing as an output of the system of education, the kids as they emerge out of our education system, that gap was already significant before our new world was thrust upon us, which had been growing quietly under the surface, by the way. It's not new as of November last year when ChatGPT was released. It's been growing quietly for quite some years, and like most things, burst onto the scene with some level of maturity. But to your point about the rapid rate of change, in January, the commentary was that prompt engineering would be the new job. But since then, we've now got agent and auto ChatGPT, which removes the need altogether for the. So within months, a job has been proposed and disappeared because of the rapid progress. I've got some concerns about the direction of AI, which I might reference at a later point, but I totally get this idea of the AI revolution releasing us more and more from low value tasks to higher value tasks as the dimensional change that goes on. Assessment may be one of those. Already, we've got better as an example. Medical AI is better at diagnosing significant medical issues like images of cancerous cells and other such things. The human versus AI success rate is not looking so good, nor are the lawyers doing such a good job against AI from the point of view of the opportunity that the AI has to digest and dissect large volumes of text-based information towards reaching a decision or a consensus in some way. So they might point to maybe if that's the low-level, low-value work that those domains of profession are involved in, what can we release those professional people to better add value to? And so maybe that's the role in teachers. What are your thoughts about that?
Look, there is a fair degree of disruption coming up. And I don't think we're going to have mass unemployment. There we will have a lot of people needing to change over to other things, which is where learning comes in again, because that skill set development is going to be so critical. There are many things you can say to that one. Look, when you talk about those examples in medicine and law, I always just think about education and how it's going to affect us. So given what you said just then, Andrew, here's a prediction for somewhere up ahead. It will be that we will have some sort of learner bot, a physical entity that is perhaps so high that is sitting in front of every child and it interacts with them 24/7. It has voice recognition, so it can talk with them. We already have these devices. Moxie is one of them, MOXIE, about $1,500 US. I think you pay about $100 a month for the upkeep. Moxie not only can talk with the child, they can also see their face. They have a camera in their forehead and it can detect the child's face. And the face has about 3,000 micro expressions on it. And this technology can detect up to a point what a person is thinking and feeling. So it will know instantly whether the child is not understanding something and adjust accordingly. Now, there are massive privacy issues with this thing. If it's on every child's lap or on their shoulder, or it's been 3D printed and looks like some sort of gargoyle so that they have their own pet with them, but it's inevitable. It'll be with them 24/7. Someone's going to make a lot of money out of this, and I'm willing to bet that Google is already thinking through it. And by the way, we can already do it two-dimensionally up to a point. But the three-dimensional one, considering that anthropomorphism that you talked about before, it's just weird how we love things like robot dogs and we call ChatGPT he or she. Like, we need to be careful with that one. It's not a she or a he.
Yeah.
Mind you, people are going to have relationships with these devices up ahead. They already are. You know, in 5 years' time, one church is going to blow a fuse because someone's going to make a big deal out of marrying one of these bots, you know, one of the big ones. And, you know, for a while, everyone will carry on about how it's just heretical that someone's doing this. And then finally, when someone's going to wake up and say, you know, it's not all bad because when I'm sick of him, I can just turn him off. You know, so I'm only being partly tongue in cheek there. You know,
Yeah.
we're going to see a lot of overlap with that sort of thing. But in education, when you talk about that technology, absolutely. And keep in mind also, already medically, a person is alive today who is probably going to live to at least 150. Because increasingly we're going to have nanobots inside our body that can kill cancer cells and maintain us in the most amazing way. And eventually, I don't know, the year 2200, we might be able to download our entity, or at least our brain, as we're about to die physically, into some artificial device like a bot, and then we can think and program it and make it move around. So in a sense, we live forever. And if you think I'm being edgy there, I haven't even started yet. I almost don't want to scare people in terms of the stuff. I want generally for people to see that there is merit in this technology. It's happened all through human history. We've been going along peacefully, and all of a sudden someone invents the spinning jenny, and anyone who used to work on a farm has to go into the city to work, and then it keeps building up and up, each succeeding sort of, you know, machinery age. And this is going to be the big one. This is the big one. I think it's exciting that we're all going to have what is called adaptive agility. Fancy words that basically mean you can cope with rapid change. And I'm not sure everyone will be able to, but it's called adaptive agility. It's a big thing.
So one argument is we've moved from the information age into the knowledge age. I'm not sure if those labels are correct, but are you feeling in this shift that we are through a momentum, a quantum shift in technology-driven change in our society?
Yes. I think we've gone beyond even a knowledge age, even though I can accept that one. It's just that knowledge increases exponentially, which is why curriculum is so difficult, because, heck, how do you ascertain what is most necessary to learn, given that it's increasing in leaps and bounds? I mean, you know, they now measure it in such ridiculous numbers that you can't even begin to measure it anymore. And there's a lot of rubbish out there as well. Like, I mean, 95% of stuff online is unmitigated rubbish. So we've got to sift through that. We've got to learn how to curate. There's a good word if you're listening to this. We have to curate down to the core essence of what is most necessary. However, I think that we're going to go into a quantum age. So you use that word just then when you were sort of putting the question together. A quantum age is where we start to seriously understand the subatomic level of humanity. And it's where we create quantum computers. Now, I'm not sure when they will come through, that they're pretty inevitable, just like nuclear fusion, possibly 20 years away, but who knows? Quantum computers, perhaps 10 years away. However, when they start to develop them, we're going to see the exponentiality in their power. And that's where eventually it's going to match us in terms of our everyday thinking. Though, to wrap up on that one, my hint to people when they're saying, how the heck can education keep up with this? How can we prepare for it? Is that the professions that are often most in need at the moment are the ones who are the human-centered industries. They're the ones when you engage with another human being, the teaching, the social work, the nursing. It's the stuff where you actually talk with other people all the time, because maybe we've partly forgotten how to do that. We need to be reminded of it again. So education, I think, needs to focus in on that as much as anything else, teaching the social, the communication skills, all those ones we know of as emotional intelligence.
Yeah, that's where I believe if you ask the question, what value does a teacher bring to the classroom? And I sometimes ask educators that. When I was educated to become a teacher, it was the body of knowledge I held in my head. And scarily, I started teaching the same year that my co-founder in EduSpark was born. A call out to Craig, who I know is on the session. And that really dates me terribly. But that was the paradigm at the time. And it's interesting, the element of care, of believing in students, it's all of those. Again, we've challenged soft skills for a long time as the name of soft skills, but you call out a beautiful point of what will always separate us, I think, for a very long time at least, are those human-centered qualities that ignite potential in other people. And that's what I can't see quite yet. I can see a bot coaching someone. I can see someone having romantic text-based relationships or beyond into avatar-based relationships, but those central human qualities are the things, for me, are the anchor for us as educators in the whole process.
You know, it's interesting. I heard at some stage someone talking about how soft and hard skills are interspersing.
Yeah.
So the new hard skills are the ones that are difficult to do as a human, such as apologize to someone when you've really messed up, or to engage in dialogue with someone who is very self-centered. Whereas the new soft skills are soft and malleable because the technology can do them, the coding, you know, the searching online and so on. So we're seeing this massive overlay of these. So interesting times, to put it mildly. But yes, I agree with you very strongly.
Couple of comments just to pause that we're getting a really active stream coming through. I'm not sure if you can see that. So a quick question from Paul again. Peter Thorpe, way up. In terms of AI, can it be used to train SENCOs, teachers, to implement outcomes as an educational psychologist report, assessment, recommendation type process? Your thoughts on that?
Okay, I know enough about this to be dangerous. I was once married to a psychologist who was an education psychologist, a gorgeous lady, and we often did talk about this. Apparently there are online support mechanisms that help people when they are facing psychological issues. Whether that can be transposed into something that is core to our curriculum is another matter, though my gut feeling, given I don't know a lot about this, is yes, it is inevitable. And the funny, peculiar thing about it is, children especially trust the artificial device more than they trust another human being. That includes adults as well, who are prepared to bare their soul to an artificial entity, yet they're uneasy about doing it with another human being. So maybe that's part of that anthropomorphism coming through again, though that is the reality of the research they've done, which is now longitudinal because those devices have been around for a while.
Yeah, interesting outcome. My view on that is, if there's a process that's replicatable through coding, then there may be some, that whole diagnosis plan type scenario and use case seems to be a good one for AI, particularly at the moment.
Yes.
Another quick question from my good friend Dave Burke, and he runs a shout out to Dave with Ed Events, and a fabulous online community to get involved with, and Ed Events will be probably doing more of this with us in future. And I think with our little problem today with LinkedIn and a few other things, that'll be well appreciated. But the whole idea of this question is about AI skills, explicit skills, and is there a literacy, even a language base emerging that becomes a part of forward AI literacy in curriculum and teaching?
Dave, there are so many perspectives to that question. I remember giving a large keynote to about 1,000 people a couple of years ago, and I made the point that maybe it is not as necessary anymore to teach children coding skills. And a few of the leaders in the large group blew a fuse because they said, we are basing everything we're doing on teaching children STEM skills and coding. And I'm saying, look, I think it's important to be aware of all of that sort of stuff, though already it's proven my point that, the devices can now do all the coding for us, and we can just fine tune it with our human type skills. So when that comes to that particular question, I must admit, I'm not really sure, because as soon as I say this is going to happen somewhere up ahead, or it's never going to happen, well, I do know that you never say never about the future. A lot of things could happen geopolitically. The world could be turned upside down. And this is me who's an optimist. A lot of things could happen. Maybe, climate change will have even more of an impact than I think it's going to have. And we've got to rethink everything to do with society. But specifically with the technology, it's going to do a lot of stuff for us. So we're going to have to become more and more human. So that's my part response to that, which is why literacy and numeracy is going to be in vogue for a while yet. Though even saying that, there are a couple of countries that no longer, and they're advanced countries that no longer teach their children to handwrite, because they've worked on the premise that children no longer need to handwrite. And by the way, when you think about it, how many professions need handwriting at the core of what they do anymore? Maybe a calligrapher, maybe a teacher who still uses a whiteboard, but gee, there's not many other people who do handwriting. Thankfully, doctors don't, because it was indecipherable when they wrote into script anyway.
That's
so now, I'm having a go at them. I'm just saying they did it so quickly, no one could work out what it was. But when it's printed, you can absolutely see it. And that's what people are saying with voice recognition and other technologies. It makes you wonder what, in fact, will overtake us in terms of our own skills. So for the moment, the wrap up on that is Focus on the human-centered skills. Show children how to be deeply, personally human, because that's where we're going to go up ahead. It's going to matter more than ever.
That's going to lead into the next question I've got for you, but there's a comment I want to make that's a dilemma. There's a struggle between two ideas. The fact that now with ChatGPT and other language-based learning models, that my job is easier in some aspects, where I can start the ideation and the foundation for creative generative content that's important in the delivery of my work. And the struggle I used to have in crafting that is actually where the value lives. The value lives in the discomfort of the struggle to ideate and the fact that it doesn't happen quickly. I think if you've already got the foundations of the ideation in the domain of work, then ChatGPT adds icing on the cake. But the dilemma is, if we make it so easy that we don't have to do the work, and learning comes from effort for work, how can we, at a biological level in the brain that requires that effort and discomfort and other associated dispositions, then we could very quickly dilute the impact of learning at a brain-based level and make us more, dare I say it, stupid over time, because we've lost the capacity to learn. So that's a dilemma going on in my brain. What are your thoughts around that?
I've read enough research to indicate pretty strongly that we're getting smarter. Now, not everyone will agree with, the people who do this sort of work on this, though most definitely people are getting smarter. So when you look at, for example, everyday, sitcoms on TV, you find that there are 6 characters involved over 6 episodes, and they go through about 18 different plots in terms of what's happening, and your mind is spinning trying to keep up with it all. Whereas if you watch something from 20 or 30 years ago, there were 2 characters, one camera on them on a single plot for the whole 6 episodes. Much simpler. Same with children's movies. Like Bambi, this thing died. That was about it. Whereas now you watch a modern cartoon format and they've got adult themes in them and they're really complex. So there is a fair bit of indication that we're getting smarter. I think we will continue to do so. It's just that we're not going to keep up at our normal, standard rate of improvement with the technology. So we are getting smarter. I mentioned before that teachers will need to become learning architects. So I don't think we'll ever sit on our butts and just let the technology take over completely. What we will do is fine tune what is offered to children all the time. So we'll be able to ascertain what happened according to the database that we look at the next morning after children have done things the night before. Then we program it slightly, adjust it a little bit, have one-on-one conversations with children constantly. Not all of them will still come to school. They might come 3 days a week. Teachers will come 4. And by the way, there's another prediction for you. I think more education will go to 4 days a week, even though it'll be running for 5 days. So we're going to have a lot of that where we're learning architects. So in terms of our thinking capacity, I think it's going to become more so. And to wrap up on that question, we're also learning what accentuates our thinking more and also what debilitates it. So we know now the stuff you should not eat, including junk food and too much alcohol and a whole lot of other stuff that is just not good for the brain. We've got a long way to go in terms of understanding what this beautiful entity can do and can't do, but we know enough to make sure that we're brain, conscious, and we can actually use it to the best of our ability.
Again, my brain is spinning with all of that. I think the real growth comes from generative conversation, which is sense and meaning making. So that's where a lot of the cognitive effort that results in the extra neuronal connections and neural networks occur. So that's something I think we always need to maintain. I'm mindful of time, and I've got some questions flowing through, and I'm really loving that it's triggering some engagement and connection with people who are listening to this. One from Andrew Flowerdew: how do leaders in primary education start to prepare staff in their organisation in general for the coming, for the coming future of AI-enabled learning and teaching? And then also someone, M. Dolce, I found that using GPT for ideation critical thinking with colleagues is enhanced, just anecdotal. Educators are questioning what is being produced, which is exciting. But that whole idea of leadership in primary education in particular, current primary school leaders, some thoughts about how they can start to broaden the scope of understanding and perhaps even application of AI-based technologies that are present in the world. What are your thoughts there?
Okay, Andrew, and Andrew, we would have to sit over 10 coffees or more to even begin to delve into this one. I think what we're talking about there is the professional dialogue and general professional development and learning that's happening in the school. And it's where it's not just a 3 days a year thing, but it's embed in everyday practice in the school, all day, every day. So we set up coaching models where people are constantly supporting each other. So Andrew, if you wanted to have a longer conversation about that, perhaps we can set up another discussion sometime about it, because I've got a few hundred ideas on how to best do that. The big point, a big picture about what you're asking there is this: it is hypocritical for someone to be an educator and to not be into learning. You cannot stand in front of young people or their parents or other teachers and say, I'm bored with all this new stuff. It's tedious. I can't cope with it. I'm into the status quo. I want things to be the way they were in 2005. Can I ask in the nicest possible way that unless there are serious mental health issues there, I want you to go find something else to do, because you're not good for kids. The big thing that you do is you model what it means to be an inspiring learner. Because if you're standing there and you're boring and you don't bother learning new things all the time, and you don't start a lesson by saying, hey, gang, just before we start, I've got to tell you about something I saw last night. It's just blowing my mind. It's amazing. If you're not modeling like that and you're boring, these kids are looking at you thinking, is that what it's like to be a grown-up learner? Blood, if I want to go there. So you are not modeling what it means to be inspired about what you're doing. That's taking into account the endless dilemmas of being a teacher today. And boy, are there heaps. And that's another conversation. So partly to wrap up on that particular question, it's basically that we have to focus extensively on the quality of the learning that's going on. So one idea just for now, I think too many schools are too insular. I think they only tap into the expertise in their school, and that's fantastic, except I reckon every teacher in the school needs to be following 5 other people around the planet in terms of the latest ideas and perspectives and issues and resolutions and solutions, so they can constantly share that with their colleagues. So we have to get out more, because there are so many amazing things being done in education right now. There really are. I'm lucky. See, Andrew sitting here with me is lucky as well. So it's great. We get to see a lot of the good stuff going on, and there really is. However, to wrap up, we all need to be learners for life. That's the critical one when it comes to that question.
Yeah, look, you've hit one of my favorite platforms, is that schools are teaching cultures, not learning cultures. And the constraints, the 2 constraints that hold a development back are the curriculum and the timetable, which rules out any real time for professional time, not after 4 o'clock in the afternoon or on Sunday or on a workshop on Saturday morning. The real-time engagement of professional learning at the workplace, at the right time in the workplace, not after school in our own time. It's one of the big uncovered central issues we've got. The other quick point to that is a good friend of mine, a shout out to John Corrigan, and through him, a principal in Melbourne at Yarra Valley, Mark Merry, have done some decent research into impactful leadership. And the number one element from that research, and people reach out to me if you want to access that research, the number one leverageable behavior of leaders is modeling. That is entirely backs your point up with the research that these guys did. Lots of comments coming through, which is fabulous. And Andrew, by the way, said it's a date. So maybe, Andrew, you need to grab Tony's email, which I'll pop back to you. And lots of lovely comments coming through in terms of questions. And I'm just trying to make sure I capture some of the elements that are going on through here. Will AI be able to manage intercultural understanding and nuances that are sometimes missed out across cultures? From Anita Wood, a really interesting question.
You know, I made a comment about half an hour ago that you can now, up to a point, plan diverse lessons with the technology. It depends, of course, on how well you put in the prompt in any case. However, I think that it's going to accentuate them eventually. I think we're going to become one world in that sort of sense, with our differences of opinion and, creed and color. We're still going to become more one world. I think children today, up to a point, and it's not perfect, more and more children are becoming more open to different cultures because they meet them all the time. Whereas 100 years ago, they didn't. The horizon was the limit of your understanding of the world. Now it is the world. They see it all the time. So I think we're going to see a new, group of kids who come through and they're actually going, yeah, This is good. I like working with other people who are very different. And that's still only just scratching on that question as well.
Yeah, I think my response and what I'm hearing is that there is an opportunity for that to happen. Even through one of the key barriers that we have in professional learning is that there's a hidden or not so well exposed bias of language, and we assume that everyone has to do their professional learning through English. And to have a more agile system that is a bit like the Babel fish. I have to laugh at how many things have predicted the future, including The Simpsons, including so many movies and Dick Tracy with the watch. But the Babel fish out of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is within realm, and I see that as a mechanism for breaking down biases and barriers. But we've got to do so the same way of making sure we keep the cultural links to what language is really about, because that defines us. But yeah, there are so, as you said before, we could sit down over a wine for several days on these sorts of things. I'm going to go to one of the other questions, and Craig's just popped into the chat. Your course that's on EduSpark, and I'll reference that again towards the end with a link. And people who want to get access to this talk or others, there's a process we can provide for you to get that. I think there are some great points from you, Tony, that if we capture those as a little mini answers, would be wonderful provocations for people to replay back into staff meetings for generative and processing, sense-making, meaning-making conversations. So that's something that, besides having you speak to staff directly. This one, I think, is a really good one, and I don't know if we'll get through all of the questions we had prepared. We hinted at this before. What are the capabilities our students need? And I might add dispositions into that for a future that might be very different.
And as you mentioned, Andrew, we did talk about this a little while ago, and a capability is more than a skill. A skill is something that teaches you directly to do something, and that's fine. And it's very important. A capability is something that makes you more capable of coping with whatever happens up ahead without exception. So there are a list of them, and good curriculums around the world address these directly. Everything from obviously literacies and numeracies, to that adaptive agility I talked about, to things like resilience, the thickness of your skin, your capacity to cope with constant change. Though I have to admit, there is one capability that transcends all the others. It is the most important above and beyond all the others, because you need this one to in fact do all the others. And that capability is thinking. Now, we've referred to this a couple of times as we go along, and there are many different facets to thinking, more than just critical and creative. It's just so complex, except the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your learning. So if children are thinking effectively, they're more likely to be learning more effectively, as compared to just being lectured at, so they just accept whatever is said to them, instead of going, hold on, does this, fit with what I was reading last night? What's my own perspective on this one? So the whole meta thing, the metacognition. In fact, I got it out this afternoon. Here's a real practical for you in terms of this session. I'd like you to meet Cookie. Cookie's a $5, hand puppet or finger puppet. I stick my finger up his backside and I'm holding on.
That's what I was laughing at. Yeah.
And I actually talk to this thing. So I get kids to bring along their own hand puppet, or they can make one with a paddle pop stick and a piece of paper. And at first they learn how to speak to it. So they say, hey, Cookie, how can I do this math problem? They then pretend to be a ventriloquist and it talks back to them. So it goes, well, have you gone back through your journal yet? Because we did it about 3 weeks ago. So you've got these kids sitting there talking to this thing and it talks back to them. So bear with me here. I haven't lost it yet. Or maybe I have. The second level is where they don't talk to it, but they think to it. So you'll see this 9 or 10-year-old looking at it. And then a little later it goes like this because it's thinking back to them. The third stage is where you get rid of the puppet. By then you've learned how to metacogitate. It is possibly the single most powerful capability you can build up in children, because that will determine how they respond to the world, how they create solution. And yeah, although the world up ahead is beautiful and it's a beautiful mess and it's got issues in it, it's going to need young people who can resolve things in a big, big way. They need to be able to think. There's my big comment to that point.
Yeah, I love that. And I found it amusing to show that, the poor kookaburra when you showed us just then. But that whole process is so clear, because that ability to have internal dialogue not be attached to any one thought stream, to step back from the thought stream and be even one step above is a real skill. That's where the metacognition really comes in. Is this a useful thought? Is this a useful feeling? If it's not, what do I do about that? Do I agree with this? All that internal dialogue is something that is strategically ignored, I think, in a lot of curricula.
Look, Andrew, yeah, that'd take us into a whole other realm as well. And you reminded me then of a beautiful capability I thought of once in terms of teachers and leaders. And it's that you become meta aware of yourself. So you actually stand up and away, and your meta self watches you from a meter away. So if you're in an interview with a parent who's getting very upset about life or whatever you're doing, you don't stay there and just cop it from that person and have your blood pressure go up. You leave your physical self there, stand up and away, and you can think more clearly. So then you go back to your physical self and you say, look, I need a coffee. Can I get you one as well? But you can't always think about that when you're being immersed in the difficulties that are going on. Teachers need to do that in classrooms as well when they're having, issues with children too. So yes, the whole meta thing is really, really important.
That clarity of distance is the mechanism that's in play there. And sometimes I refer to that to the balcony. It's not my original. I have to attribute who started this concept, balcony and dance floor. And journaling separates the temporal time where, something happened, and then at a later time I get on the balcony and say, well, how did that go? What did I learn? What would I improve? That sort of journaling. But the more you do that, the closer you can bring that to the moment that you're in, where just seconds sometimes and a breath allows this massively fast organism structure in our brain. It is almost a different organism at times, isn't it? So that we can get a sense of feeling the pulse at the same time. It's being on the game and in the game at the same time, isn't it? And that's where I see the most artful and skillful leaders operating, where they can be in that assessment mode, fly on the wall, as well as the mode of being in the moment. Great sports people do this too, to bring another one.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mentioned that predictive element at the start of this, and the people who are high achievers, almost without exception, know how to predict ahead. And by the way, that session I've got in EduSpark on the magic of thinking talks about this. We need to explicitly teach kids two levels of types of thinking. One is the physiological, so they understand how their brain structure works. And then there's the psychological, so they understand how they can take ownership of that thinking. So given the mental health issues we have amongst teenagers especially, we need to show them how, if at all possible, they can control their thinking.
No, it's definitely something that's very much on one of my favorite platforms to talk about. And just a few comments that are coming through. Actually, I don't know if you can see what I posted that time, but I posted the link to your course at the time you said your course, so people could see the link to that. And from Doha Calaban, she said, I'm not sure of gender there. Yes, that course is great. I took it. It was very, and they are very. So that's something that we'll also work to. Question, I'm just checking time, and how are you feeling in the conversation at the moment, Tony? What's emerging for you? Are we missing anything in particular as a key point that we can draw to? Because I've got another question sitting there ready to go from Sabrina.
So many things, Andrew. I love having conversations with you. We've had quite a few, and you're good for my brain. So that's attesting to the point you were making a little while ago. So, hey, go for it. What sort of question have you got?
Very good. And this is a case of generative conversation where I think a second skill that we've missed in that, and Sabrina, I'll come to your question in a second, but there's a second skill which is inherent in what we said before, but needs to be exposed, and that's the skill of listening. And I don't think, another nerve, but we don't listen to ourselves, and we don't listen to our internal dialogue. And in this conversation is a model where we're processing the meaning in each other's conversation, adding to it at times or emphasizing things. If there was something that was really contradictory, we could explore that in a generative, non-confrontational way where we could argue different points, and we don't feel deeply attached to any one particular idea. So me attacking something of yours as an idea doesn't actually attack you personally. So that attachment to ideas, so a couple of ideas in there that I think good listening skills get at. But I won't get on that horse because we'll be a while on that one. But Sabrina has said, how can we persuade another part of the education ecosystem, my words are failing me now, how can we persuade parents who refuse to implement technology in their children's education and fear screen addiction?
Okay, here we go with that 10 coffees thing again, because it's a rather complex conversation, partly because there is screen addiction and it can absolutely happen. And I know now and again, I need to get my phone and bury it somewhere for a few hours so that I'm not living on it constantly. And there is enough data on that to attest to the worth of not being on it all the time. And funnily enough, although it's probably just, some anecdotal evidence, they talk about the CEOs in Silicon Valley who are into cramming this down everyone's throats around the planet, and yet they often don't have their kids own a mobile phone. And funnily enough, I'm okay with that one too. So when Sabrina asked that question, the dilemma in part to it is that, yes, we can see absolute benefit to it, except there's a fabled balance there between the technology and us. And children especially, I think, need to find that balance. So yes, you need to demonstrate to parents respectfully that the children are going to definitely benefit and learn more effectively with it. But at the same time, pay respect to the ones who are unsettled about it. Because we, used to have Ned Ludd, the Luddites back in, I think, the 1820s, and he used to put machinery, pieces into machinery to stop them working. We're now seeing technological Luddites who are trying to stop the progress of this. They're not going to be able to stop it, though. I think there is something to be said for children not being on it all the time. They don't sleep as well. They don't converse with each other. And countries like South Korea and Japan are having significant issues with kids who are so obsessed with gaming, they don't even want to come out of their bedroom. And they have the delivered pizza slipped under their door so they can just keep going on it. Okay, so there's extremes to everything, of course. There's a lot of gamers who can do well with whatever they do. So to wrap up on that question, there's a balance to this one. And so when I hear parents being fearful of it, I try and build up their confidence in it and draw them into lessons that we do, perhaps invite them in, have parent evenings when you say, okay, we're not into it obsessively, but there are some good ways to use it. Here are some, so they can at least see and try it themselves. See, the whole issue with parents is another thing again. They're being left so far behind on trying to keep up with what is happening in education and any other profession other than their own. And you can't be a generalist anymore, well, not easily. Okay, so we've got to help parents with that one, but pay respect to the bit where they just want kids to meditate and spend some free time just hugging a tree and just being with nature, because that's part of our humanity.
So many points in there that would be a discussion in its own right. Parents are uniquely also people who've also themselves experienced education, unlike many other circumstances, and it's a generation ago. So when I was at school, and I never used to do that, all those narratives come in. But what I heard as a meta point is it's a relationship that's trustful and leading the thought and development with parents that allows you to have the positioning to have influence with parents. And schools that don't have that dialogue and relationship and connection, I think, struggle with that at a great deal. Looking at the time, we have to wrap up very quickly, but there's some interesting science from a guy called Andrew Huberman. And those who know me know that I'm a real, I just geek out on what Andrew Huberman has to bring. He does a lot of eye-based neuroscience research and accesses a lot of it. And interestingly, focused gaze, like we are doing now, drives the cortisol pathway, which drives stress. And it's all to do with focus after a target goal. When we go for a walk and horizon gaze, we start to manage down some of that cortisol. And so it's absolutely necessary to have distant gaze breaks, which and particularly green ones if you can. So there's some very interesting neuroscience that backs that up. We've got people beginning to wander off because we're at the top of the hour. I will acknowledge again that we had a problem with StreamYard and the connection that we had established already that was working before to LinkedIn. And so we'll follow up LinkedIn to provide the registration link that Craig's already done so people can get access to the recording. We'll provide access a number of different ways. I think there's enough here, Tony, to almost set up an occasional or more regular fireside chat. People have enjoyed the dialogue by the looks, and you may not be seeing those, but lots of people have made comments about the level of conversation between two people that have an interest in this. And really, it's your expertise and leadership that we wanted to bring to the platform. So as a quick wrap up, if you want to contact, and I'm just going back to my link here to show it, if you want to get involved and talk to Tony directly, that's his email address there. If you want to, so quite easy to remember, tony@tonyryan.com.au. And for me, I'm Andrew at eduspark.world. I'm splitting my attention here, and I thought that I had that ready, but you can reach out via EduSpark with us. And Tony, would you feel okay with another one of these at some stage in the near future, maybe in a month down the track?
Mate, do one-legged ducks swim in circles?
I love it. Yeah, we might have to have virtual red wine going at the same time, so that might add to it. So thank you for everyone who watched. I know that we had comments coming in from YouTube, and it's present there as a replay as well. And I know Tony has tremendous value to bring, both through the platform, through the courses you've got in our platform, but through his work. So please reach out to Tony if you want him to in some way connect with your school and add his thought leadership to a very complex world. Thank you, Tony, so much. I'll be in touch, getting lots of thank yous from people rolling through. Can you see that screen, by the way, of the
No, I can't. So that's fine. We'll get to that one too. Can I just make one final comment, taking into account our time? I love the concept of a beautiful mess. Education is a beautiful mess. It always has been. It always will be. Your life is a beautiful mess. It's got all this beauty in it and then tricky things all the time. The world's a beautiful mess. Just go with the beauty of it. You need to hang in on this profession. It's already the most important on the planet. It's going to become even more so. So, Andrew, thank you for your time, and thank you, everyone, for hanging in with us.
Yeah, appreciate that. And we'll fix up mostly, I think, with our friend Dave Burke and Ed Events to make sure that we don't have any little hiccups next time. But thank you again, Tony. Take care. Stay well. Enjoy a wine now. You've earned it. You've got the evening happening there, and I'll be in touch. Thank you, everyone. You can hear my words. I need the wine. Thank you, everyone, for a really good presence and conversation with you, Tony. We'll talk next time.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay well.